Let's bring on Robert Vaughan. He is from Just Right Media. And Robert, I'm sure that you've been following all of the, before we get on to Trump, you've been following some of the issues with COVID and all of that. What do you think of our world right now?
Well, it's an upside down world, isn't it, Laura-Lynn? It's also very good to see you again, talk to you again after we met last year. But
Yes.
the COVID nonsense is just so depressing because it's not simply a political thing. Because people blame Trudeau here in Ontario, they blame Rob Ford for all of the lockdown, and in every province they blame their premiers. But people have to realize that the vast majority of Canadians voted these people in, and if the polls are accurate, they will vote them back in again.
I
You
know.
and I belong to a very, very unique club. Maybe the one percenters, or maybe 3%, I don't know, but there's very few of
Right.
us around who can see the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest in this case.
There does seem to be a blindness, Robert. I do agree with that. And I think when I ended the show and I said I'm worried yesterday, I think, that's what I'm worried about is that a lot of the people are not seeing what's actually going on. And that these things, that they are putting in, is actually, this is just the beginning. I mean, it is going to get, a whole lot worse before it can possibly get better. And I do pray that it gets better. But it's interesting times. So you've been watching the election down in the States. Robert, you recently had a fascinating talk with Salim Mansour, one of my favorite people, and you had some insights into the United States. So share with us a little bit about your perspective on what is happening in this unusual, unprecedented time in the US of A.
Well, again, we do have a mutual friend in Salim Mansour, and he was actually one of the very few people, along with Ann Coulter and a few others, who correctly predicted that Trump will win when he came down that escalator. And he's been right on the money all the time. He says that he will win again, and I hope he's right, but tomorrow we'll know, or maybe we won't know because of all of the skullduggery that's going on down in the United States. My biggest take on the entire election after watching this last 6 months or so is how um, devout the left are, the Democratic Party, the communists, let's just call them the left, how devoted they are and how willing they are to do absolutely anything to win, fair or foul, including setting buildings on fire, churches on fire. Today we have reports of scrutineers, I think they call them poll watchers down there, not being able to enter polling stations. We've had some polling stations actually not open up. The workers refuse to show up. We've had voting booths that don't work, and so they've had to shut down that. That's in Georgia and Nevada. And all of these things put together with the Antifa, and of course, these Antifa people are not Trump supporters. They're Biden supporters. They're the boots on the ground. They're the brown shirts of the Democratic Party. And the media are in lockstep with the whole thing. And I always come back to the media when I'm discussing this, because somebody once said that if the media correctly reported on Barack Obama, he would not have been the president of the United States. If the media had correctly reported on Hillary Clinton, she would not have had the nail biter loss that she did. She would have lost by a huge percentage. Trump, if he was reported accurately, would be the darling of the United States, as he is of the rest of the world. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He's brought peace to the Middle East. I mean, can you imagine for at least three countries under his watch, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and now Sudan, about a week and a half ago, what does he have to do? Does he have to walk on water? I know he said that he's probably second to Jesus Christ in popularity, but there's absolutely nothing this man can do, including bringing peace to the Middle East, which will bring him on side with the media in the United States. It's quite a it's quite a fascinating thing to watch from a political science point of view, and I'm sure that historians will really like to get into what the causes are of all of this and how people, the general public, are being duped, much like with the COVID crisis. They're being duped. And I lay most of the blame on the mainstream media.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's really shocking. You know, this morning, Robert, I watched a video. They're marching for Trump in Nigeria, thousands,
Yes.
thousands marching for Trump. And his own people falsely accuse him of racism. And of course, we saw this same thing with Maxime Bernier. I see
Yes.
the same thing now as well with Rod Taylor of the Christian Heritage Party. Anybody that seems to be on the right, what you automatically get is some sort of false label of racism. And so, and it's horrendous. I mean, the assault is endless. If you were only to watch, it's no wonder Canadians, by and large, do not respect Donald Trump at all for what he's done. When you see the reports as put out by CBC, CTV Global, any of them, all of the papers, they never, end of putting up some stupid face he's making, maybe a comment that he made offhanded, not taken in context, and not a word about what he's done right. And when we look at what you alluded to, these peace treaties or whatever we would call them in the Middle East, these are unbelievable. People said like there'll never be peace. And Trump has brought about substantial agreements between these foes.
It's true. This is not getting the credit it deserves in the media. And of course, it's because it's an election year and it's Donald Trump who is facilitating these peace agreements. But if you think about it, since that area of the world was carved up after the First World War, there has been constant conflict. And it was only until 1979, Anwar Sadat of Egypt made a peace agreement with Israel. And of course, he was assassinated for that effort. And then again, I think it was in 94 that Jordan entered into a peace agreement with Israel. And of course, they've had a stable relationship ever since. But in all of this time, 98 years, there was only 2 of those agreements. And there's been a tension in that area, only broken recently this year with Donald J. Trump facilitating it. Under his aegis, we've had the United Arab Emirates, Sudan, the 3rd largest Arab country in the world, now being taken off of their bad boy list because they've made peace with Israel. You've had even Kosovo has recognized Israel. Serbia has moved their embassy to Jerusalem following Trump's lead. And like I say, this man has done unbelievable good in the world, and he's so vilified in his own press in the United States of America. They should be so proud of that man for what he's been doing. Granted, nobody agrees with absolutely everything that anybody does, and I'm certainly not in total agreement with what Donald Trump has done. But that's what my disagreements are so marginal compared to the accomplishment that he's been able to do that they don't even bear mentioning. I only wish that the American people could wake up and recognize the man for the good that he's done in that country and the world.
Wow. Well, I mean, that is wonderful to hear that. And, he also has done so much for the Black community in America, and yet you will not hear that from Black Lives Matter. Their group and Antifa, basically I saw another video that is showing that there is a whole level of communication and planning for if Donald Trump gets in, literally, like these guys were radicals, like how to get into the White House, how to completely usurp him, how to undo everything. So I'm sure that they're going to be stepping up security. I can't see how that happens. You bring in the guards and all of that. I don't know how that can happen, but they basically have plans for not good things. And what's your guess on if we have a Trump win, or it looks like it's leaning that way? People are saying we don't know if we're going to have the final numbers today, but if it does look like a Trump win, do you think that there's every potential of like a civil war?
Well, it's anybody's guess, but I'm just like anybody. I'll guess. I think he'll
Right.
win,
Hmm.
and I think that yes, there'll be violence. I understand that most of the shops and buildings in Washington D.C. are now boarded up. And why are they boarded up? They're boarded up because the left, the Democratic Party supporters, are militant. They are violent, they are criminal, and they will stop at nothing to make sure that Trump does not get elected, or if he does get elected, that they'll burn it all down, as one Democrat supporter once said. And Salim Mansur, I'll go back to Salim because I've learned so much from him. He called this the Democratic Party's Götteramadun. And that is a reference to Wagner's opera, where the gods, not being pleased with their underlings, not the mortals, burned it all down
Mm.
out of spite. It's like you're
The
not
rain cycle.
worthy. Yes, exactly. Das Nibelung. And that's what we're seeing with Biden, mostly Hillary Clinton and Obama, because their fingers are still in all of this. Um, that's what we're seeing is that they are willing to destroy the United States, quite literally, and not just figuratively. They will destroy the United States, murder people, burn buildings down, destroy the monuments, destroy the history, simply because the American people did not see that they were their gods. They were the elite chosen to on Twitter. I mean, you're very into, and unfortunately, there is talk on Twitter. I mean, you're very into the Twitter and to the social media. You've seen what some people are saying here. The word civil war, and even over the COVID measures, people are saying words to the effect that the day is coming when some good men are going to have to do some bad things to some very bad people.
Mm.
That's a veiled threat because you just can't come out and say what people really want to say. But when 80% of the population support what our politicians are doing, when half of the American people believe what CNN is telling them, we're a long way from any sort of sanity returning to the West. And I think it was Breitbart who first said that politics is downstream from culture. And we need a cultural change. We need an absolute cultural change before we're going to see anybody like a Trump actually, and I don't mean Trump personally, people like him who might follow him in the Republican Party, Maxime Bernier in Canada. We're going to be a long time because it's going to take a long cultural shift to get what are essentially the children now who are going to school with masks on, being able to reason and to look at the news and to be able to tell, the truth from rot when they see it. So
How
I
do you
don't hold
think
out
this?
much hope, but
How do you think this happened? I guess when you see that the left has taken over schooling, when they want to indoctrinate children at a younger and younger age, and we, being well-meaning and innocent people, like we just didn't get that that's what they were doing. Like some sort of plan was initiated a lot of years ago, and we all thought that we had a safe world and we could trust authorities, police authorities, and also education, ministers that would be leading and guiding our civilization and our societies into a good place of common sense and of freedom. But actually, somewhere along the line, it's been taken over by some, ideologues that do not share our values for freedom and actually feel that they need to impose upon, the rest of the world that doesn't agree with them. They need to impose their positions on us. And they've done that very well because a lot of the young people, a lot of people are really confused right now and they fail and cannot see the truth of it. And do you have any ideas about how we actually swing the culture back, except now we got to fight like mad?
well, we got to do what we're doing here. We have to be able to use the tools at our disposal to do an end run around the establishment and around the media and try to set up our own media like True North and Andrew Lawton. like the Rebel and Keane Bexty, who's out on Roxham Road, I think, today, talking
Yes.
about how people are still crossing over there, regardless of the shutdowns. But it's interesting that you bring up education because I was a school trustee here in Ontario for a couple of, well, about 6 years. And I got interested because I could see the nonsense that was going down. It goes back for quite a long time, back to John Dewey and his theory of education. And I don't want to get into anything like that, right here and now, other than to say that it has been a very long process, and we're starting to see the results of it now. We started to see the results of it when I was a school trustee, when I was shocked to see that of the OECD countries, 17% of all high school graduates were functionally illiterate. And so I asked the director of education in London, where I was, have we ever failed any students? And he goes, no, we never fail a student. And I go, doesn't that discredit the value of a diploma? And there was just, like, they couldn't understand where I was coming from asking such a question. You mean you want to fail students? How could you be so hurtful to them? And I say, we're not doing them any favors by just putting them through this mill and letting them come out the other side with no education and functionally illiterate. And I guess we're reaping what we've sowed over the last 50 odd years. And it's going to take a sea change in attitude to fix this.
Right, right. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I think that the pushback, like you're saying, the things that we're doing and the media conglomerates that are kind of coming up is helpful. And maybe they didn't anticipate that we would be so vocal and that we would stand up to it. I've heard that there are polls that they're really surprised how many people, for instance, would be not interested in taking the vaccination. And I think that's because all the information, the doctors that are speaking out, it's a lot of people, it's professionals, people that have spent a lot of years in those same schools that somehow indoctrinated all of these other people. There are people that it did not work on, and they are spreading the word. And so as we stand, I think we're an unexpected force for the left because they're seeing, not everyone's just going to comply. But I do get worried when I'm walking through the streets everywhere and people are outside with no one around wearing their masks. And I think it's a small thing, but it's a sign that they bought in and they're uneducated in this realm. And it's very disturbing. And the reason they're uneducated about this is because the mainstream media is not saying the things they should be saying to put the country at ease and to take down the fear factor. They're increasing the fear so that they can increase the lockdowns, increase all of this, and eventually it leads to a very bad place if you look at the end game.
The very fact that we have a state broadcaster, which I could never understand growing up, because you'd hear about that over in communist countries, suggests that there's something very fundamentally wrong with the way that information is being disseminated in this nation. And then about, 3 years ago, Trudeau came down and said that we're going to give trusted media, $600 million over 3 years. So, of course, trusted media are the people who are going to say what they want them to say. And that's one of the reasons we don't see any of the counter arguments about lockdowns. It's one of the reasons we don't see the counter arguments about the PCR test and taking, to test for COVID. If you recall, when the PCR test was invented, AIDS was coming around, and the person who invented that said, look, you cannot use this on infectious diseases because you can magnify the RNA to such a point where you're going to find whatever you're looking for. But his advice was dismissed. Why? I can only think that it's political or totally ignorant, or maybe a bit of both. But the fact that the media stand in the way of truth to the public is our biggest problem. And I think it's shows like yours and True North and Rebel and other blog sites and other YouTube sites that are getting the message out there. For example, I mean, you look at like a Tim Pool, who has 1 million subscribers. That video and 100,000, 200,000 people could see it within 24 hours. You've got some, he could put out a video and 100,000, 200,000 people could see it within 24 hours. You've got some great stats as well. And I think that we can take a little comfort in knowing that when you're broadcasting out there, Laura-Lynn, that people are watching and listening. It takes time, but that's what our opponents, the commies of this world, the pinkos. Of course, I'm from an age where pinkos was the word to use, commie pinkos. It took them 75 years, 80 years to get their philosophy and their ideology into the schools and into the institutions and into government. And it may just take us that kind of time to reclaim it. Unfortunately, sometimes I think we're too nice, though. They got their way by guile and deceit and violence. We're the good guys. We don't play by those rules. So what do? We just go out there and try to tell the truth to anybody who would listen.
Absolutely. And you know what? And you do that. And Robert, Vaughan, I just thank you for taking this time with us. And Just Right Media, where would somebody listen to your interviews and the work that you do?
We broadcast on shortwave. We've had a radio program that used to be in the University of Western Ontario, but we got kicked off of that for our political views. And then we went to shortwave broadcasting in Germany and in Maine. But our website is justrightmedia.org, and we have a YouTube channel as well where you'll see a lot of videos with people like Salim Mansur, Christopher Monkton, Christopher Essex, a lot of the names that you might recognize too, Laura-Lynn. So I would encourage people to just give us a try out there, justrightmedia.org, and check us out.
Well, I just appreciate that so much, Robert, and you really are a hero in the nation. You are tracking down truth, and that is just right. And so thank you very much for spending this time with us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. You know, it's not easy to deliver the truth of what our sick world is doing, but for some of us, we feel that we have no choice. Because if we are silent about these abominable things, then we are letting evil go unchecked, and we cannot do that. For those of you wonderful people who are writing me and are sharing your encouragement, I am deeply grateful. Thank you for all the letters that you've been sending. Thank you for the donations and the support. I found out that in order to speak the truth, you have to become very, very strong. If you would go to my website at www.lauralynn.tv, you'll find all of the ways that you can contact me. Remember, my friends, all is well. All is well. Thanks for joining me.